Hello everybody! Thank you for your interest in our research. I want to welcome you to our talk, Question and Answers, Important Steps to Let AI Chatbots Answer Questions in the Museum. My name is Stefan Schaffer, and this is the research that I conduct together with my DFKI colleagues Louise and Mino Sasse, and the colleagues from Linon Medien, Louise Schubotz and Gustke. Let me give you a management overview about our project Chatbot in the Museum in a nutshell. Chim is an AI-based chatbot prototype. It will use conversational interaction that can be done via speech or touchscreen input via a virtual keyboard. You can ask the system questions and receive answers to these questions about the objects in the museum. What we present in this research is the categorization of visitor questions, which is an important task for building our NLU models. We also present our ideas of a multi-tiered NLU approach. The final system will be evaluated in the Städel Museum in Frankfurt in the middle of December. Let me give you a short introduction. So, what many people in the museum would maybe prefer are human guides. So, why do many people prefer this? They give you, of course, basic information about the objects in the exhibition. On the other hand, you can also ask them questions and they can give you direct answers about these questions. What they can also do, they can tell you stories about the exhibits, especially if they maybe do not have a good answer, but can use tell something that is related to their question. On the other hand, think about, have you ever been afraid of asking something in a group? Maybe you are, maybe you're not, but some people sometimes are. Or you just thought, oh, that's a silly question, I do not want to ask it, and therefore you didn't do. But maybe you could. Okay, if there is no human guide, you may select the audio guide. And this is also good because it can give you basic information and it can also tell you stories. But what it cannot do is question answering. The answers to many questions are not included in the audio guide texts, and therefore you often have to listen to these texts even if the answer to your question is not included. The next generation of these kinds of audio guides are multimedia guides, and these guides are quite nice because they can give you the information and additionally they can show you some pictures or videos, and however we still have the same problem that these systems cannot really answer questions. So they are nice, but again, no answers. The aim would be a chatbot guide that can give us basic information. It can also tell us stories, of course, but it can also answer our question. So let me tell you some facts about the chatbot in the museum. Our first idea in this project was, what if you could ask the object what interests you? So if you look at all these objects that you can see on this screen, many different questions could come up in your mind. And so do at the side of the visitors. They have specific questions, but different visitors, of course, have different questions. For example, this woman could ask, when was the picture created? Which is kind of a factoid question. And the man could ask, what is shown in the picture? And this is an open question. So how could we answer these kinds of questions? An easy source of answers is the museum database. And the Städel Museum has a very good, nice digital database where we have some answers to be found. These answers are especially suitable for fact questions, of course, for example, for the title of the painting, the painter, or when it was painted, for example. To answer these questions, we need intents and entities. And these intents and entities we usually find inside the questions. And therefore we need a lot of data to be gathered, and this information then has to be mapped to the structured data. So a mapping has to be done between the intents and the information in the museum database. Our other data source are audio guide texts. And these texts we can actually use to answer fact questions again, because also these texts include factoid information, but we can also use them to answer open questions. And what we do here is that we employ a big natural language model which is called BERT, and this model is able to find answers in unstructured data. However, the task of finding the information can even be improved if we would have some information about the content of the museum text, if we would have some information about the content of the audio guide text, and therefore we could make use of content type annotations at the text. If we know about the question, that the question belongs to a specific content type, we could only look in text passages inside the text that belong to this content type. Coming to content type, Barth et al. Already investigated what kind of content does people ask to artworks using conversational AI systems. And what you can see here in this little graph that they created is that the majority asked questions that were related to the meaning of the artwork, around 60%. However, if the aim is to use content types to improve the natural language processing capabilities of your system, a more even distribution of the used categories would be desirable. So let's come to the aim of our work. Our first aim is to collect domain-specific questions for our specific artworks that we are using in our chatbot. Then we want to refine the annotation method with further content types. After that, we will annotate our gathered questions with the new content types. Then we will define answering strategies with and also without content types. So let me explain our question collection. We created a website to gather questions about 14 selected exhibits of the Städel Museum. A campaign was initiated in cooperation with the Städel Museum via the Städel blog, and thereby we found over 200 users, and from the sessions with the users, over 2,100 questions were collected. The task of the users was to ask 1 or 2 questions per each artwork. This is the question collection website that we used. At the left-hand side, a picture of the object was displayed. In the right-hand side, they could enter as many questions as they wanted for each exhibit. What I already mentioned is that the available content types seemed not to be good enough because the content type meaning was overused with about 60%. So we found a few new content types, which is namely the type content, model, response, and provenance. This graphic shows that the distribution of question according to content types in our work was better distributed. Our maximum is at the content type content at about 30%, and the content type meaning is only at about 25%. What we can see here is some differences between the objects. For example, we experience that for some pictures, the content type artist is used more often than compared to the other objects. And the reason for this is actually the object itself. Questions like, is this the dog of the artists, were for example asked. Another interesting finding can be, for example, attributed to the content type context. Context inquires about the historical, political or social context where the artwork was produced. And what we can see here, that in this rather modern looking like picture, this kind of context was not so often asked by the users. On the other hand, questions about the visual style of the objects were asked. The users, for example, asked, is it a photo or is it painted? And in our last example, we can see that for the dog, the content type play was used quite often compared to the other examples. And the reason here are questions like, for example, is the dog hungry or does he sleep well? So let me give you an overview about the answer strategies that we are developing in our project. In the following table you will see the planned natural language processing mechanisms and their required and optional metadata enrichment. In the left column you can see an overview over the single modules that are being implemented. So we will have a factoid entity relationship module. We will have a factoid module which is based on BERT. We will have an open-ended intent-based module, and we will have another module for open-ended question which is based on a similarity. For the factoid entity relationship model, for example, entities, relationships, and also event annotations are required. An additional enrichment besides that is not really needed. On the other hand, the BERT module can be directly used even without further enrichment. Additional enrichment, for example, the content type annotations can be used to filter the answer sentences according to the content type that is related to the question that was asked. The open-ended intent-based module requires also the content type annotations. However, these kinds of annotations are quite high level, which means that the module will profit very much from additional enrichments, for example, for the entities, the relationships, and events. The open-ended similarity module requires section annotations. These annotations gather sentences that have the same topic. However, they do not really relate to a specific content type. Additionally, we can of course make also use of the content type annotations here in this case, and also entity relationship and event annotations can help. So let me conclude. We collected questions for the Chatbot in the Museum project objects in the Städel Museum. We refined an annotation method with further content types that we found. We annotated the questions that we gathered with these new content types, and of course also the other ones that we already have from the work of Barth et al. The result of our annotation revealed that the overused content type meaning could be reduced by about the half. We defined answering strategies also using content types and further enrichment to improve the answers of the system. In our future work, we will finalize the implementation of the overall system, and then we will conduct an evaluation study in the Städel Museum in the mid of December. Thank you for your attention.